Welcome back to Air Quality Matters and One Take. One Take, my take on a paper or report on air quality, ventilation and the built environment. One take in that it's, well, done in one take and tries to summarise for you a scientific perspective on something interesting in, well, usually 10 minutes or less, because who has the time to read all these amazing documents, right? This week, we're looking at a fascinating paper from a team in Finland with a bit of a twist. It's titled Remediating Moisture and Mould Damaged Residential Buildings in Finland, Costs and Benefits for Health and Climate. Now, this one really caught my eye because it asks a question that gets to the absolute heart of so many debates we have in housing and public health. We all know instinctively and from the mountain of evidence that fixing damp and mould is the right thing to do for people's health. But what this paper tries to answer is a much harder, more pragmatic question. Does it actually make financial sense? When you add up all the costs and all the benefits, for health, for energy savings, for the climate, does the investment actually pay for itself? It's a bold question, and the answer is really quite surprising. So let's set the scene. The study is based in Finland, a country where, like many places, climate change is expected to make moisture damage in buildings worse. And it's important to understand the specific kind of problem they're tackling here, because it might be a bit different from the damp and mould conversations we have in places like the UK, but I think there's an overall lesson here for everybody. They're not primarily talking about internal condensation from cooking and showering. The main issue in Finland for the buildings they're studying is structural. It's about water getting in from the outside. They're looking specifically at a common building stock, residential buildings from the 1960s to the 1980s, a period of major construction. Many of these buildings, whether they're single-family homes, terraced houses or apartment blocks, have external walls with permeable materials, like certain types of brick or concrete or timber that soak up driving rain and hold onto it. Over time, this leads to deep, severe moisture and mould damage right inside the wall structure itself. So when we're talking about remediation, we're talking about fixing a fundamental failure of a building envelope. This context explains why the two-tier repair options they compare are so extensive. Option 1 is what you might call the rip it out and start again approach. They call it material replacement or MR. This is the big expensive job. You remove all the damaged materials from the external walls and replace them with new up-to-date energy efficient stuff. It's a major intervention and they estimate its service life is about 50 years. Option 2 is a bit more subtle. It's called the delayed material replacement or DMR. Here, the first step is cheaper, quicker fix. Instead of ripping walls apart, you focus on improving the building's airtightness from the inside, sealing up the walls and the leaks to stop the mould and contaminants from the wet wall cavity from getting into the indoor air. This idea is that this initial fix is good enough to solve the immediate health exposure problem and delay the need for the full expensive replacement job by about 10 years. So the total life of this approach is 60 years. The really clever part is what they put into the calculation. On one side of the ledger, you have the huge upfront cost of the remediation work itself. On the other side, they tried to monetize all the benefits. They included the economic value of preventative illnesses, specifically new onset asthma and respiratory symptoms. They used a metric that we're used to here called disability adjusted life years or DALYs, to quantify the health gain and then put that monetary value on it. They also calculated the money saved on heating bills from having more energy efficient or airtight walls. And finally, they even factored in the climate benefit by calculating the savings in the social cost of carbon. So they crunched the numbers for both scenarios over their full service life for the whole of Finland. And what did they find? Well, this was the kicker. The headline finding is that For both options, the cost massively outweighed the monetized benefits. The project doesn't pay for itself. The net cost benefit is a big negative number. For the immediate rip-it-out approach, the net result over 50 years was a loss of 5.9 billion euros. For the delayed approach, it was even worse, a loss of 6.4 billion euros. So while the delayed approach is much cheaper at the start, the long-term benefits of doing the full energy-efficient replacement straight away make it the slightly better financial option of the two. But both are still deep in the red. When you look at the breakdown, it's clear why. The upfront remediation cost is just enormous, around 8 billion euros. The health benefits, while significant at 1.2 billion euros, just can't make up the difference. The savings in heating costs and the climate benefits are even smaller, less than 1 billion combined. The cost of the builders and materials simply swamps everything else. And their sensitivity analysis confirmed this. The single biggest factor influencing the final number was the initial remediation cost. Tweak that by 20% and the whole result changed dramatically. Tweak the price of carbon and it barely made a dent. Okay, so at this point you might be thinking, well, that's a bit depressing. Why are we even bothering if it's a net financial loss? And this is where the paper and its discussion gets really important. You have to look at what was not included in the model. The authors are very clear about the study's biggest limitation. They did not and could not include the effect of remediation on the property value of the building itself. This is a massive piece of the puzzle. Think about it. A properly remediated, healthy, energy-efficient home is worth significantly more than a damp, mouldy one that's falling apart. That increase in the building's asset value is a huge financial benefit to the owner and, by extension, to the national wealth tied up in the housing stock. If you were able to accurately put a number on that increase in value, it's entirely possible that this whole calculation would flip, turning that multi-billion euro loss into a net gain. The problem is that value is incredibly difficult to estimate accurately on a national scale, so it was left out. And that, for me, is the real insight here. The true takeaway from this paper isn't the big negative number, although it does make the headlines, it's the methodology. This is, to their knowledge, the first time anyone has really attempted to apply this kind of integrated assessment combining health, economics, building science and climate economics to the problem of mould remediation. It provides a powerful framework, a new way for policymakers to think about these huge investment decisions. So, in essence, while this study from Finland suggests that on paper fixing mouldy buildings doesn't show a direct financial payback from a health and energy savings alone, it also powerfully highlights that this is not the whole story. It forces us to acknowledge the other less tangible benefits that we all know exist. It pushes us to ask a better, more complete question, not just how much does this repair cost versus the savings, but rather what is the total value we as a society get back from maintaining our buildings in a safe, healthy and usable condition. That total value includes the health of the population, the efficiency of our housing stock and, critically, the preservation of a massive national financial asset. This paper doesn't give us the final answer, but it gives us a much, much better way of asking the question. And in this field, as we all know, asking the right question is often more than half the battle. Thanks for listening. This has been this week's episode of One Take, which is not possible without our partners, Safe Traces and Imbiot. So thanks a million to them. See you next week.